Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk about the expansion of Islam that comes out of Arabia in the mid to early 7th century, and I'm going to talk about the context. It's a really interesting question and a really... Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit more about the expansion of Islam and the establishment of Islamic culture. So this is a really interesting question. How is it that this religion, which begins in Arabia, which we examined in the last video, is kind of isolated from the rest of Western civilization at this time, comes to play such a dominant influence, comes to exercise such a dominant influence in the Middle East and even into parts of Europe? And so we're going to see why that happens. First of all, we're going to look at the Byzantine Empire. So remember that we talked about the fall of the Roman Empire right around the time of the midterm. We talked about how the empire becomes weak and eventually disintegrates and is replaced by these new Germanic kingdoms. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those kingdoms in the future. That's what happens to the Roman Empire in the West. In the East, however, the Roman Empire survives and is going to be known to history as the Byzantine Empire. And it's the sack of Rome in 410 that kind of inspires the Byzantine emperors to take the defense of their empire more seriously. And they establish fortifications for Constantinople that enable the city to survive the attacks of the incoming Germanic invaders. And so the Byzantine Empire survives and then actually starts to rebuild as we enter the 6th century. So there's an emperor called Anastasius, who's not a very inspiring or charismatic figure, but a very successful financier. And he is able to rebalance the economy of the Byzantine Empire, and then even to lead the Byzantine Empire with a surplus. And a couple of emperors later, the Emperor Justinian is going to try and use this surplus to restore the Roman Empire throughout the West. And basically, the Byzantine Empire is going to attempt to reconquer the old territories of the Western Roman Empire and to restore the full glory of the Western Empire. And it's a tribute to Justinian's great ability, how close they came. They were able to reconquer the province of North Africa. They were able to reconquer most of Italy, and they were able to restore some parts of Roman control in Spain. And so this program, attempting to restore the Roman Empire, is very successful. The Byzantine Empire seems to be on the verge of establishing itself as a major power in the Mediterranean, and it will remain a significant power. But it's in the middle of the 6th century, so around 550, where things start to go wrong for Justinian and the Byzantines. There are religious divisions between the different Christian groups in the empire. The empire starts to run out of money after these expensive wars. And third and most devastating, the Black Death emerges in Europe for the first time. No one really talks about this outbreak of the Black Death. Everyone focuses on the one that happens much later in the 14th century. But this is a really important outbreak because it weakens the Byzantine Empire at this critical time. You have a loss in population. That means you're going to have smaller armies, and it also means that your tax base is going to be diminished, and the revenues that the empire is bringing in are going to be diminished. And so because of that, the Byzantine Empire, after the death of Justinian, enters a period of instability. And there's a lot of infighting, a lot of civil wars, and this gives the Persian Empire a chance to attack the Byzantine Empire. And so now, right around 600, we enter a long period of war between the Romans and the Byzantines. Between the Persians and the Byzantines. And the Persians see an opportunity to finally achieve what Xerxes and Darius had achieved, and that's Persian expansion into the Mediterranean. I'm just going to adjust my notes here a little bit. And the situation becomes so desperate that the Byzantines are even melting down the precious metal that's used to make sacred objects for worship in the churches, to make coins. And these coins contain an inscription that says, "God help the Romans." And this isn't being sarcastic. It might sound kind of funny to us, but it wasn't sarcastic at the time. It was a heartfelt prayer that the Byzantines felt that the empire was on the verge of destruction, that most of the territories of the empire, apart from a small area around Constantinople, had fallen to the Persians. And in this context, a new emperor steps forward named Heraclius. And Heraclius seizes control of the Byzantine Empire and then leads the Byzantine army to a series of improbable and, to the people at the time, miraculous victories over the Persians. Such that in the early 630s, the Persians and the Byzantines make peace, and the border between the empire is roughly where it was before. And considering how close the Byzantines had come to defeat, this is a great victory. However, the long-lasting effect of this war, and the reason why it's significant, is that both of these empires are exhausted. Both of these empires are economically, socially, culturally, politically exhausted by these long wars, and they're about to face the Islamic juggernaut that's coming out of Arabia, and Islam at this time is everything that Persia and Byzantium are not. Its followers are committed, it's new and young and vibrant and energetic, and this is going to pose huge problems for these empires. And so it starts kind of very slowly through raids. The Islamic armies are conducting raids out of Arabia into the Persian Empire, and each time the Persians amass an army to try and punish them, they end up getting defeated. Persian army is low on morale, Islamic army is highly mobile and highly committed. And the Persians just keep fighting. The Persians just keep fighting and they keep getting defeated, and in the end, the whole empire ends up getting wiped out. This huge Persian empire that had dominated the Middle East and Western Asia for so many generations disappears basically in about 15 years. By 650, it's disappeared, and now you have this growing Islamic empire in the Middle East. And the same thing happens further to the west with the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines can't seem to defeat these raiding Arab armies, and they send larger and larger armies, and the Muslim armies keep defeating them. And the most serious defeat is at the Battle of Yarmouth. This is in 636, and the Byzantines raise a huge army. The battle goes on for 4 days. There are points when it seems as though the Byzantines are going to be successful, but in the end, they end up being defeated, seriously defeated, and their army is destroyed. This is where Heraclius makes a different decision to the Persian emperors. Heraclius recognizes that the Byzantine Empire is not going to be able to stop the Islamic armies at this time. And so he doesn't keep fighting on. Instead, he makes what must have been the heartbreaking decision to give up the territories that he had fought so long to maintain against the Persians, and he retreats back into modern-day Turkey. And so the map of the Mediterranean has been changed. Map of the Mediterranean has been changed because now we have this new Islamic empire that's taken over the Persian Empire and also controls Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, three of the wealthiest provinces of the Byzantine Empire. And so this means that Islam has now become the most powerful force in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. The Persian Empire has disappeared, and the Byzantine Empire has survived, but has survived, and this survival is an important achievement, but it survived in a much weaker form than it had been prior to this. And so its territory is much reduced, still a powerful force, but is much less powerful than it had been before. Nevertheless, despite these great successes, there are challenges emerging for the religion of Islam and the leadership of this new force in the Mediterranean. And we'll look at those in the next video.